Welcome to Book Spectrum. I'm Chris Cordani, your host. On Book Spectrum, we don't just like to talk to seasoned writers, but we like to talk to authors, and new ones especially, from across the, I'll say it, spectrum. Today we have a rather interesting fellow, Daniel Shyti. He's written quite a few books, but this one is rather interesting. It's called American Gaslighting. Remember the movie in 1944? My gosh, I must be pretty old, but I love old movies anyway. 1944, Charles Boyer and Ingrid Bergman had starred in a movie called Gaslighting. It was about the husband trying to make the wife look like they're crazy by filling her head with all sorts of things to make her believe that the things she saw as true were not true. That's kind of happening here in America, and you'll be very surprised, or maybe you won't be surprised, as to who's doing it. Daniel Shyti is with me right now. Dan, welcome to Book Spectrum.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be on your show, and it's also a pleasure to talk to somebody who shares a deep love of books.
I'm a book guy. I like books. I wanted to call the show Books and Bourbon, but the idea would have been to have a shot of bourbon or two while I was doing the interview, but things kind of can go to a downward spiral if I do things like that, or a downward spiral or anything like that. That's not good.
Well, if you use your imagination, you can even smell the bourbon through the radio, right?
I probably couldn't a little while ago because I just got over COVID, but that's a different story for a different day. Hey, speaking of COVID, that's part of the American gaslighting, and you do address that in the book.
Yes, I do, because while COVID was certainly a dreadful disease, the American left in particular has the motto: "Never let a good crisis go to waste." So the COVID pandemic was certainly used to advance a lot of totalitarian strategies, like the mandates that you saw, the lockdowns, and basically a complete violation of our constitutional rights. And, now you might call it 2020 hindsight, but as we start to look back at the way the pandemic was handled, just about every mistake that could have been made was made. And some people will say it's deliberate. Some of it is just bureaucratic incompetence, but there was certainly a lot of violation of our rights and a lot of gaslighting along the way, okay, to basically get people to comply.
Daniel, politicians lie. They do it. We all know it. People will say and do anything to get into office and maintain that power. That's a known fact. However, there's a big difference between the flat-out lies, or the lies that people kind of catch later on, and true gaslighting. Gaslighting is a process.
Right. And I like to say that a completely honest politician is about as common as mermaids and unicorns. But the fact is that they're experts in telling you, what you want to hear for the most part, even the good ones, even the ones that mean well, right? They're always trying to frame reality in the light that makes them look most favorable. But gaslighting, you're correct, is most definitely a process. It's a strategy, it's a psychological ploy, and it has many attack points, as I've outlined in the book. And it is, the target is to get people to doubt reality. I mean, you can see reality in front of you, and they're telling you something completely opposite. And if they tell you enough times, what I call the low energy thinker begins to absorb those messages as their new reality.
I want to get into the book a little further, but let's get into the gaslighting process, Daniel. We all know now, thanks to some expert research done by some really good people, Operation Mockingbird actually happened. This is where American intelligence had plants in the media and all through the entertainment industry push their views or push propaganda on the American people. This is outright gaslighting to anybody who really doesn't know what it is. It was denounced as a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, so that's pretty common, right? And that's one of the tactics they use. And the left in particular resorts always to the ad hominem attack, right? Which is the destruction of one's character to discredit what they're saying. And I use an example where, for lack of a better one, let's say that Mother Teresa tells you on a clear, crisp, sunny day the sky is blue, and Adolf Hitler tells you the same thing. Does it make it any less true because Hitler said it? Okay. So that's part of the weakness of what I call the low energy thinker, because they don't evaluate statements on their face, regardless of source, right? So basically, when you start to, if you adopt that mentality, you say, okay, is what I'm hearing true, right? It doesn't matter, and who's saying it, and that's part of how the left is trying to discredit everything about America, including attacking our founders. Because they were slaveholders, for example, you have to discredit the Constitution. You have to discredit Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and George Washington, because they were all slaveholders. But I'm here to tell you, do you want to live in a society where life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is not guaranteed by the Constitution just because Thomas Jefferson wrote those words in the Declaration of Independence? See, so that's the crux of what I'm getting at. We have to apply logic. We have to exercise mind, and we have to evaluate the statements that politicians make on their face to determine what is truth.
I'm with Daniel Shyti on Book Spectrum, his book American Gaslighting. One thing I admire is your attempt to come into this with an open mind. It's very difficult when you know what's happening to you, but you tried to come in here looking at this from all sides of the spectrum, because while we do say, or we have said in this particular interview, the American left is very good at gaslighting, and the American government has as well. This is a tactic that's been used by businesses, by cult leaders, by domestic partners, if you will, over human history. Dan, when people write or read these kinds of books, they're looking to confirm their own biases. How did you try to avoid doing that when you did the research for this?
That is great. In fact, I cover the exact psychological aspect of confirmation bias. And you may know the song from Paul Simon and Garfunkel, the boxer. He has this line that says, "A man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest," right? Beautiful line, extremely poetic. And that is confirmation bias in a nutshell. And it took a great deal of discipline for me to avoid that trap, but I'm aware of it, okay? And I wanted to give the subject, a very, very honest treatment, and a very fair treatment, to make sure that I wasn't just injecting my own biases and worldviews. So and my worldviews and my opinions about certain things did change a bit as I did the research. So it was a process of great discipline. But I'm also a student of psychology. I'm an electrical engineer by training. Okay, so I have a very logical mind, and that's the crux of what I'm pushing, is to help people think logically. So in keeping with that logical analysis, I had to be somewhat scientific and be constantly aware that I wasn't just injecting my own biases. So I had some opinions about certain things, like, for example, everybody that's homeless is suffering from addiction and mental illness. Okay, so it's not an economic issue. It's a personal, social, decision type of issue. Well, that opinion was somewhat correct, but it wasn't a total, scenario. It turns out that after I researched the statistics, it is quite high. It's about 76%. So those are things that I had to verify everything. I couldn't, just trust my own feelings and my own opinions about things. And that was the process by which I maintained and wrote the book. And I've heavily footnoted all the claims I make, the significant ones that aren't easily checked. And so the people can go directly to the source and judge for themselves.
Dan Shyti is the author of American Gaslighting. He's here with me on Book Spectrum. I'm Chris Cordani, your host. Another thing is, people are going to say, "Ha, not me. I'm the smart one. I know when people are gaslighting me, yet they're completely gaslit, and they're apt to call you the stupid one for pointing it out." Case in point. We were led to believe when Donald Trump was president that he was locking migrant children in cages. Well, we saw the facility. It wasn't really what they said it was. The fact is, though, this was a policy that was adapted during the Obama administration, later on canceled by the Trump administration and reinstated by the Biden administration. But when I talk with people about, or I ask them why they hate Donald Trump so much, it's because, kids in cages. He put kids in cages. I tell them, if you actually look this stuff up, you'll find that this was implemented during the Obama administration. And when it became a real controversy during the Trump administration, he decided to end the process. And I just keep hearing people, no way, that can't be true. Look it up, but they don't, because maybe they're afraid to find they're being gaslit, or maybe they're afraid to maybe find their worldview could crumble a little bit.
And you're exactly right. And that takes me to the second significant psychological aspect that we're dealing with, and that's called cognitive dissonance, and how people handle cognitive dissonance. Now, cognitive dissonance basically is when you hear a set of facts that contradicts a deeply held belief. Okay. So it's actually a good thing that we all have cognitive dissonance. Because even when your deeply held belief is aligned with objective truth, which, by the way, certainly exists. Another gaslighting point is that they want you to believe objective truth does not exist, and that's a lie. But cognitive dissonance, right? When you have a alignment with the truth, you know you're right. Somebody presents a fact, okay, your cognitive dissonance internal alarm goes off. And that's a good thing, because that's telling you, hey, what you're saying doesn't ring true, right? And then you can go and check yourself, and you say, oh, no, I was right. I had my, the right set of facts. So, as Socrates, who was a great questioner, he basically had, a desire to always want to live in truth as the best you can. And that's why I think we have cognitive dissonance. It's a desire, an inner desire to want to live in truth. So, when you hear something that doesn't ring true, your cognitive dissonant bell goes off. And if I may continue, here's the other problem with cognitive dissonance. You also can become obstinate to when you're not holding the right set of facts. You resist all new information because it contradicts, with your deeply held beliefs. Now, immature people basically reject those facts outright and stick their fingers in their ears and pretend they don't hear you. That's one way they do it. The other thing they do is they start to attack the source, like my Mother Teresa example, and my Hitler example. They say, well, you must be Hitler because that's that doesn't square at all with what I have to say, or what I believe. So therefore, I'm going to destroy your character because you're obviously a vile person. So that is the bad aspect of cognitive dissonance. Now, a really mature person with an open mind, as I like to, as I open the book, is to look for people with open minds. They would listen to those new facts and they would say, I never thought of it that way. And I'm going to evaluate what you said. And if it's true, then I'm going to change what I think. And that's really what we need to trigger, is that kind of discourse in America that gets people to understand that they are being gaslit, that the facts that are coming out in the media constantly every day, the vast majority are lies or half-truths.
The problem is the media, especially in recent years, has been propagating conspiracy theories. Remember the Russian collusion hoax, the good people on both sides hoax, Jussie Smollett hoax, but denouncing any questioning of their narrative as conspiracy theories. It got to the point where I'm thinking, hey, if they say it's a conspiracy theory, somebody must be onto something.
Right. And that is a classic tactic of a gaslighter. It's called projection. Okay. They basically accuse the other person of doing the exact same thing that they are already doing. Okay. So it's a way to deflect attention off of themselves by saying, for example, so we're the protectors of the democracy. No, you're not. You're the destroyers of democracy. But they're projecting, right? And they call the other side fascists as destroyers of democracy, when in reality they're not, right? And that's the examples you bring up are exactly what they were doing there with those types of hoaxes. And conspiracy theories, anything that the left tells you is a conspiracy theory, I advise people to check out, because I could see the leftists denouncing my entire book as a conspiracy theory, but I'm telling you, you go check the facts. Everything I've said is going to prove to be accurate.
Daniel Shyti is with me on Book Spectrum. I'm Chris Cordani. Daniel's book is American Gaslighting. I would say a lot of things the government will tell you they don't want you to believe or they don't want you to know is a conspiracy theory. I'm going to give that a left and right and even center issue, depending on who's in charge. But I will say this. The long period of gaslighting allows the powerful, the ones who are actually doing the deed, a way to sneak their own agenda in and make people look like either they're racist, they're hateful, they're bigoted, or they're downright silly or crazy for not going along with what's being thrown in. Here's something I don't want to say you attack it, but I do want to say you observe it. Critical race theory. On the surface, the three words sound nice. Like, well, wait a minute here. No one wants to be racist. Everybody should have the same opportunities. We don't want to hurt anybody here. We also want to make sure everybody's treated nicely. Love thy neighbor. Isn't that what the Bible said? Isn't that what everybody should say? On the other hand, those three words are a nice package to something a little bit more, and I'm going to use the word sinister, but it's true if you really you really peel past the surface and maybe dig a little further. Critical race theory is not directly taught in schools, but it's used in schools. It's taught definitely on higher education levels, which again, people have to learn different points of view. I get that. The point is, when a politician stands up and says, we have to take CRT out of schools, and someone on the other side says, wait a minute, no one's teaching CRT in schools. That's actually true. But it's in the curriculum. It's in the little privilege games that teachers play with their kids, and it's been done. It's been recorded. It's in the idea of bumping up grades or padding grades for people who happen to be quote unquote of color, but not because you're trying to help somebody, because the theory behind critical race theory, I think I used the word twice, but you understand. The idea behind critical race theory, Dan, is purveyors believe that certain people are less than and need to have an equal outcome to push an agenda. That's sending the wrong message, to be honest with you. But when somebody points that out, they're crazy or they're bigoted. Fact is, CRT in and of itself is bigoted.
I'm going to go on record and say I attack it. I attack it vehemently. I think that it deserves every ounce of scorn and ridicule that we can possibly throw at it, because it is one of the most diabolical aspects of the gaslighting that's going on in America right now. It's an attempt to completely fracture American society by constantly injecting identity politics of, the color of your skin. Just think about how ludicrous it is that I'm supposed to constantly view people based on the amount of melanin in their bodies. Okay, and if listeners aren't familiar with melanin, that's the chemical that gives our skin pigmentation. So you can't come up with a more superfluous, a more shallow way to look at another human being. And in contrast, Martin Luther King basically gave us everything that we need as far as judging each other, right? Judging people by the content of the character and not the color of their skin. What more do we actually need than that as far as racial guidance, right? And then, as you mentioned, loving your neighbor as you would love yourself. So with those two things combined, those are the most profound pieces of wisdom that we can muster as a human race on how to deal with people who just don't look like us. So what's the big deal? And critical race theory, I might add, has roots in Marxism. Okay, it is a repackaging of Marxism, and it basically substitutes class warfare with race warfare, and or conflict, I should say, is a better word. Substitutes class conflict with race conflict.
Well, the other problem I have with it is it basically tells young minority children that they're less than, and it tells young white children that they're automatic oppressors.
Exactly. Yeah. So it heaps guilt. Now you picture yourself, if you're a child in school, you're dealing with a lot of social pressures already. Now, if you're a white child, we're going to heap guilt on you. Okay. Now you have guilt as an additional burden, in addition to all the peer pressures you face daily. And for a black child, okay, they tell you that the system is rigged against you, right? So it creates a loser mentality in both parties, right? Whether you're a person of color or you're a white kid, you're both being barraged with negative messaging that pits you against each other and creates a defeatist attitude.
Dan, your book doesn't just hit the issues today. You look into the deeper psyche of the human mind when it comes to the gaslighters and those who they're trying to gaslight. You go back into sort of the primal needs of a human. We talked about the hierarchy of needs, but Also, you go back to the mentality of the first tribes on planet Earth, where you had your regular people and the people that found their way to power, how they kept that power, and what they needed to do to keep that power going in their own families or, let's say, social circles for generations to come.
Right. So, I like to analyze everything, and even in the writings I've done on leadership, on common human denominators, right, and what human needs basically are. And our principal basic needs are needs of safety, nourishment, shelter, those kinds of things. And we all want the same things, and we all want to live in peace. We want to live in safety, regardless of where you come from and what your racial or ethnic background is. So I use that certainly as a backdrop to not only analyze human nature, but also to demonstrate how fortunate we are here in America, how our most basic survival needs are so easily met compared to other parts of the world, and commonly called the third world in particular, where people are still starving to death. They don't have basic medical care. They don't even have shelter. They don't have enough fuel to heat their houses and things like that. All things that we take completely for granted in our country. So that backdrop to me is very important, because why would a leftist tell you that this great system that makes it so easy for people to advance suddenly has to be, quote, burned down, in their words, right? I don't get that. It seems very self-destructive.
Let's take it back into today and talk about where the gaslighting comes from and why they're doing it, or why the gaslighters in power today are doing so. And we're not just talking about the ones in power here in America, but you look at the World Economic Forum. These are people who want to track your energy usage, but tell you, hey, this is going to be a great thing. You're going to own nothing and you're going to love it. It's going to be the perfect thing. By the way, you can chug off in those electric vehicles and hope to get from one place to another, or maybe even less than 10 hours. It depends on how far you're going. However, we'll be flying our private jets because we're the ones who'll have all the good stuff, but you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. What they're doing is actually trying to consolidate the power into their little circle while packaging it up into something pretty and wonderful, which is what I've seen for years. And we even go back to the Patriot Act. Hey, we're going to infringe on your personal rights as a country because something bad happened. We're going to call it the Patriot Act because if you don't like it, you're not a patriot. The Inflation Reduction Act. Well, we're going to actually implement policies that are going to increase prices. We're going to sick 87,000 more IRS agents on you. That's going to cost a lot of money, and who's going to pay for that? But hey, it's an Inflation Reduction Act, so it's a good idea because it sounds nice.
Right. Those kind of titles to legislation are Orwellian doublespeak, basically. You can count on them being the exact opposite of what they are. And and getting back, the Patriot Act was passed by a Republican president, right? So I criticize what has become of the Patriot Act significantly, but that's an example of how politicians trigger emotions in people and get them to stop thinking rationally. And I basically say that one of the art of politics is a rational analysis of how to trigger emotional responses. That's what they do. So when you title something the Inflation Reduction Act, people stop at the headline and say, "Oh, good! Look at my wonderful Democrat, legislator. What they're doing for me. They're passing a bill to reduce inflation." And when you go and do the scratch and sniff test on this thing, you realize that it's just a complete, tractor trailer full of leftist spending that will do nothing to reduce inflation. It will increase burdens on Americans, on the average American. And like you say, I think they're in process of weaponizing the IRS to go after political adversaries. That's what I think the plan is. So people will call me a conspiracy theory for that one until it comes true, right? And the same thing, just happened. They're calling this "Build Back Better" light. Okay, in the book, I talked about how Manchin came out against Build Back Better, and I said, but yeah, don't claim victory just yet, because you watch them, they're going to chop it up and tuck it in under smaller bills. And that's precisely what happened. And sure enough, Joe Manchin from West Virginia jumped on board. And then here we go. Okay. Another $500 billion worth of spending.
Same thing with the Great Reset. It's not a reset. It's a great reset. So you're going to enjoy that. I've already went through the whole, you'll owe nothing and you'll enjoy it. But the fact is, again, packaged up to look like something really nice. And we'll be thinking, hey, that's not so bad. You can chop one of our arms off. It's for a good cause.
So, the World Economic Forum, I cover, there's a phrase I came across just recently in Latin, cui bono. Cui bono means who benefits, who benefits. So you look at what's going on in America and you ask yourself who benefits. And then you start to look at these parties, and some people will say, well, they're all working together. The truth is that they're not. They're working for their own interests. It's just that their interests are temporarily intersecting. So we have China. China would love to see America in disarray. They're constantly, on our social media advocating for all of these crazy leftist policies, not because they particularly care, but that they know that it creates disarray. The second is, the true believers. You have the AOCs and the Bernie Sanders of the world, who are true believers in their socialist, quasi-Marxist policies, and they're working basically to bring down the American Constitution.
I thought about that one, Daniel.
Yeah.
I've been tossing that around for a while, as far as Ocasio-Cortez and
Right.
People like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. I have a little degree of respect for Ocasio-Cortez because she had trouble getting a job in her own field, so she went down to get a real job as a bartender and things like that. I get that. She seems to be a real believer. As far as Sanders and Warren are concerned, I'm of the school of thought, or at least I made this up myself, and they believe in the socialism industry, which is another form of gaslighting, because they're gaslighting young people who are for that left mentality to believe that these people are fighting for them. But I'm telling you, socialists don't generally have 3 houses and become very wealthy.
No, you're exactly right. And and then we have Nancy Pelosi. I don't think that she's a true believer at all. She's a power playing panderer, basically, and she'll do anything basically to maintain her own power, the power of her own party, and also and so she goes along with just about anything that helps advance that power. So there's another one who is another type of politician that is working at common purpose here. And the World Economic Forum, the American Constitution is heavily problematic for the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum believes in totally disarming the American public. The little Second Amendment thing is bothersome to them, right? And a variety of other freedoms that we enjoy that don't fit with their socialist model of the world.
That's where you get all these gun control celebrities that are trying to tell people, hey, we don't need guns. Nobody needs guns. Of course, their favorite politicians, and many of them have bodyguards with various firearms, if you will. So it's hard to believe these people. Dan, I want to get into 2 more things. First, how do people fight back?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. And I have a very, very simple, easy first step for everybody to do. And I say, I'll call it simple, not necessarily easy, because those 2 things are different. But we have to stop self-censoring. Okay, self-censoring. That's where basically that's where leftist privilege is created. And by that, I mean they have the privilege of monopolizing the airwaves. They have the privilege of running their mouths in corporations and trainings and meetings and saying whatever they want, because it is the orthodoxy of the day. Whereas a conservative who doesn't necessarily go along with these things puts a sock in their own mouth and keeps quiet. And we have to stop that. We have to speak our truth boldly and with passion, and not be afraid to engage the other side in conversation, short of getting into a fist fight. I talk about exactly how to do that, how to do it in an elegant way that basically challenges people's thinking without necessarily sticking your finger in their face. But self-censoring is a huge problem. And that's one of the things, I'm here to start a movement, Chris. I'm not just here to sell books. Okay. I want to ignite a movement to push back against woke ideology. And that's the number one thing. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm not self-censoring. I don't care where it takes things, but I'm not going to shut up, and I'm going to encourage other people to do the same. When you believe in the American system, say so. When you think woke ideology is destroying America, say so. If you're sitting through a stupid corporate training that tells you that you must cede power and all these other idiotic things that are based on the melanin level in your body, say so. Fight back.
It's no secret that I agree with you on a lot of this, Dan, because if people want to dig into me and know where I stand on issues, yeah, I'll be honest with that. And I don't like to make book spectrum political. What I do want to say is gaslighting is happening from those powerful people in the government and, of course, around the World Economic Forum, those leaders. And it's not just against those on the right, but it's against those on the left, too. A lot of people who want to maintain power are going to give lip service to some of those on the left who are saying, hey, we need some help getting some jobs. We need some help with families who are down in their luck. And I get that. But if they're just getting the lip service and they're saying, you'll get this if you subscribe to this woke ideology, people will fall for it.
No, it is. Okay. And I think, some of the primary victims of gaslighting are people that consistently vote Democrat blindly without, really giving it a second thought. Now, I want to be very clear that and in the book, I boldly state, I'm a conservative. I'm a conservative first. I happen to hang with Republicans because that's where I find conservatives. If you could find me a conservative Democrat and they have the right values and the right policies, by all means, vote for them. So in my opinion, this is not a red team, blue team thing. It's a philosophical battle of whether or not you want to move America towards a totalitarian state or whether you want to be a conservative, which is somebody who believes in small government and the Constitution as a static framework as written. And it's not something that can be, willfully reinterpreted by some activist judge whenever they feel like it. That's really the root of conservatism.
Dan Shyti, thank you very much for being with us on Book Spectrum.
Thank you so much, Chris. And the book will be out on August 29th. It'll be available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Apple eBooks. So I look forward to continuing the dialogue with America. And I thank you so much for having me on.
While this conversation did lean to the right, and admittingly I do that as well, I try not to make this show, as I said a little while ago, a political program. It is something that we should all know. Those in power are going to try to gaslight those who are not in power to recruit them into whatever they want, whether it be as a foot soldier for their cause or as a trade for another issue you're passionate about, or just to call others who oppose them crazy and shun them in society. This is not new. This has happened for centuries. This is in human nature. It's something we have to learn to fight back against. And Daniel Shity's book does that. Thank you very much. Once again, the book American Gaslighting. Pick it up on Amazon or wherever you get your books digitally, or maybe even in the bookstore. That's always nice too. We like to patronize bookstores. There is a link on our Book Spectrum page to pick it up, though, if you want to do that from the comfort of your own home. Once again, thank you for listening to Book Spectrum. I'm Chris Cordani.